he says, I have no time to do anything else. As soon as I come back, simply I like to lie down. For many people, they take food only one time, dinner, night. Morning there is no time for even eating. Hectic activity. So he was telling, Swami, this is the life here. This is the life. Even if I want to do, I will not be able to do that. I was asking him, how long you sit for meditation? How long you are able to think about God? He was hesitating to answer. But finally he said, probably I may sit for 10 or 15 minutes. He is not sure. But even the 10-15 minutes he is sitting there, his mind is partly running outside. It is getting late, get up, like the mind will be telling him. So the conflict comes there, conflict. We don't know how to adjust our worldly life with spiritual ideas. We have lost that adjusting faculty. It is not impossible, but you must have a very strong determination to do that. Otherwise time runs on. Dina jai, ayu jai. Days run by, age also, body is also aging. It doesn't care for anybody. Time runs on. Whether you think of God, whether you don't think of God, it's immaterial. So, the more we become old, the more we are not able to concentrate. And the earlier stages, the more it becomes difficult for us to train the mind at the later stages. That is why Sri Ramakrishna gives clear instructions. Do all activities in the world. We will never say give up the world and run away from the world. We don't say that. We only say think of God, remember God, and then engage yourself in activities. Even this concession, they think it is too difficult for them. It's actually a concession, I should say. Just think, remember him once and you run to the world. You will be all right. It's a concession actually. But even that we are not able to do. So, lives after lives we have built this way. So mind refuses to think real to be real. It always thinks unreal to be real. So we are always in trouble. That is the samsara. Anyway, it's all right. So Sri Ramakrishna says that whatever path you may follow, the goal of human life is the vision of God. First, the goal must be fixed. That's the first point. Then, choosing the path. Second point. Third, following spiritual disciplines. Sri Ramakrishna says, observe Ekadashi. Fortnight once. Observing Ekadashi, you must engage yourself in thinking about God, in praying to Him, engaging yourself in spiritual activities. That's the meaning of, that's the purpose of observing fast, of Observing fast, if you go and spend your time in nightclub, what's the use of your observing fast? There should be connection. Then only it has got meaning, otherwise it becomes meaningless. So let us try to follow these things, whatever Sri Ramakrishna has said, and build up our life accordingly. Now I shall read who has given spiritual instructions to practice spiritual life in this world. He has given hope to everyone. That we need not have to lose our way in the life. We have come here to work for freedom. To fight the evil and to transcend finally both good and bad. Go beyond all duality. Then experience the immense bliss. Once you arrive at the absolute truth, there is no more suffering. Sri Ramakrishna has very clearly stated that each one should have to work. No one in a way is idle in this world. But in what way we are active, that's important. Idleness is bad, it's true. But simply being active, is it enough to give us freedom? Is it possible being active to get rid of suffering? The problem of suffering is to be solved. Once we have taken birth in this world, we are in for suffering. No one can say he was free from suffering. In one way or other, we have to pass through the fire of suffering. Well, we are active in one way and enjoying the benefit of being active that way. To give an example, you're all working in the various capacities, in various business enterprises, doing different types of jobs. That way you are very active. But being active that way, did you not get any benefit? You did get. What is that? Secular benefit. More money, more comforts. But that will not solve the problem of suffering. Sri Ramakrishna tells we should be active spiritually. From Sri Ramakrishna's point of view, we are spiritually idle. We are very active, materially speaking. Spiritually, we are completely idle. So, whatever we might earn, whatever palatial building we may be living in, we may have plenty of worldly prosperity, still we may not be free from suffering, because as long as we are holding on to the unreal things, we cannot get rid of suffering. That is why it is prescribed that the people who are actively engaged in the world, without fail, they should try to be with holy association. It is very important and very significant. Sri Ramakrishna has stated, one can certainly see God. Very clearly he has stated, God is not imaginary. It can be realized. These words have come from the person who himself has realized God, who himself has experienced that immense bliss. So, he is sharing that wonderful experience with the people who come to him. Then he said, sure, God can be seen by anybody in this world. But Sri Ramakrishna says, you can get God only through the practice of spiritual discipline. So we have to find out how far we are able to move along in the spiritual path. Spiritual discipline is the measuring rod. If we have not undertaken any spiritual discipline, it means we have not stepped 1 inch forward in the spiritual path. Spiritual discipline is very important to go forward in spiritual journey and reach the supreme abode of peace and bliss. Even incarnations of God did perform intense spiritual practices. Sri Ramakrishna's own life will show us how he practiced intensely the spiritual disciplines for 12 long years, for getting the vision of Divine Mother. So it only shows the importance of spiritual discipline. So we have to step up. Man is essentially a temporal being. When I say man, it means woman also. It's a common word. In a general term, we say man, a human being. Hence, he should forget himself in order to have an experience of God. Now, who is this man? We need to know about it. It may be defined as a being made up of the Atman plus a score of upadhis. Upadhis. That is conditionings. Man is God in a conditioned state. Spiritual discipline is the process of deconditioning him. Deconditioning. That is the purpose of spiritual discipline. Once we are freed from the conditionings, we realize the truth. Awareness of time is the matrix of all conditionings. Spiritual exercises aim at leading the self beyond the consciousness of time. Conditionings of man are in both ways. They are outward and inward. Physiological, social, cultural, and political conditionings are outward. It is easy to master them and escape their influence. Now, what is inward conditionings, which is rather very difficult to handle? Vasanas. What is vasanas? Desires. They are called as vasanas. They are inward conditionings. So we are being pulled by outward and inward conditionings. So we are constantly suffering because of these conditionings. These inward conditionings are essentially psychological. They are stored up deep in the unconscious. They are very difficult to bring under control. So, the importance of spiritual practice is very significant. The essence of spiritual practice consists in consciousness must be freed of all ideas. Mind is full of ideas, overcrowded ideas, confusing ideas. The Atman, which is pure and simple consciousness, loses its state of freedom when it is conditioned by desire. Desire is the mark of temporality. It is simply the feeling of a need. The feeling appears on the plane of consciousness as a psycho-mental state. That is a vritti. In Sanskrit we call vritti. Psycho-mental state. Desire is undifferentiated. It is a simpler state of mind. But vritti is differentiated into intellect and will. When desire appears on the plane of consciousness, what will happen? It becomes an idea moving towards an act of will. What is will then? Will is a self in action. The self in action is will. Therefore, surrender of self-will means surrender of the self to God. Desire, what does it do? It disturbs peace of the soul. Once the desire comes to the mind, until it is satisfied in some way or other, you are not peaceful. So it calls for action because it knows that there is something wrong with the world. The psychomental states that exist between desire on the one hand and action on the other are very subtle. The aim of all spiritual disciplines is to control these subtle states of consciousness and finally stop them. Now, the ways are suggested to bring the vrittis under control. What are the ways? Worship, pilgrimage to holy places, group singing of hymns, reading of sacred scriptures, selfless activity, remembering God. These are all external helps to bring the vrittis under control. So these are called spiritual activity.
Just as the secular activity is very distinct, its benefits also are very distinct. In the same way, spiritual activities also are very distinct and its benefits also very clear. The appearance and disappearance of the vrittis is a very subtle phenomenon. Our attention has to be trained continuously. It is not just a few days I did it, then, oh Swamiji, nothing is happening. No. You have to do it steadily for sufficient length of time. First, to be aware of the coming and going of vrittis. And second, to exercise control over them. Control over the impulse to act leads to control over acts of will. Control over will leads to control over ideas. Control over ideas leads to control over desire. See the process, how the desire is to be controlled. You have to follow all these steps. Control over desire leads to contentment, which is the dawn of divine knowledge. Contentment. Man should redirect his desires to God by the help of reason. Whatever that is not spiritual, not real, temporary, must be given up without any hesitation. Now, the spiritual aspirant has to pass through 3 stages. See, all these things we understand only when we undertake spiritual disciplines. Simply keeping quiet. I am coming to the ashrama since 45 years. What happened? 45 years of your coming to ashrama only has inflated your ego, but not has sublimated the vrittis inside you. So spiritual disciplines are to be well attended upon. We mean what we say. We do it consciously. Then we understand all these stages. In the first stage, the spiritual aspirant feels a vague need of God, but he is happy without Him. That's the first stage. In the second stage, he wants to possess God. He realizes intellectually that divine experience is the supreme aim of life. He devotes some time during the day to the chanting of the divine name. He sincerely desires to walk in the way of God. The third stage, When he comes to the third stage, the spiritual aspirant cannot live without God. He takes God with him in all his deeds and utters his name with faith and feeling. This inward thirst teaches him to withdraw his mind away from the senses. Now what is happening? The objects are pulling the senses towards them. The senses are pulling the mind towards them, and we are being pulled and getting knocks. So the spiritual aspirant, undergoing spiritual disciplines in various ways according to the instructions from the Guru, learns the art of contemplation, and such a person is led by God himself into the mysteries of life divine. So we should try to understand very minutely how this mysterious desire is creating all sorts of disturbances. We have to analyze it. Then it becomes easy for us to handle the desire. You must know how to handle the desire. Then you can walk without any difficulty. You will be able to live on in spite of the desires. You are not to be disturbed in spite of the desires occupying your mind. Now, desire is like a fire. Used in the right way, the fire cooks food and helps man to live. It is really wonderful how fire plays a very important role in our life. All these Agni, Vayu, Jal, each one has got tremendous importance in our life. Pancha Mahabhutas we call. The same wire, the same fire which is used for preparing food and nourishing ourselves, the same fire used in the wrong way, it burns the world. So also, desire turned to God makes us divine. But desire turned to things of the world makes us miserable. The very fact we are miserable means we are under the clutches of desire. Desire becomes concrete in the form of preferences. Hence, desire suffers death if we ask nothing and refuse nothing. Na dveshti, na shochati, na kankshati, Bhagavan says in the Gita. That is the state of handling the desires. Imagination about worldly things creates attachment to them. Imagination about God will create love for Him. The same faculty used one way is destructive, used in another way is constructive. Used one way it binds us, used another way it leads us to freedom. A devotee should therefore imagine that God is his protector, giver of happiness, and that he always walks with him in life. Silence is of immense value in obtaining control over the mind. Be a witness and observe the things. Being in that state, we will be able to solve many things that are disturbing us. We practice meditation and japam. We progress a little, then comes a period of dryness. Period of dryness. It seems that the doors are entirely closed. At that time, it is necessary that you stick to your spiritual practices with infinite patience. By so doing, you will find one day that all of a sudden the doors are opened. What a great joy it is then. In spiritual life, many such thresholds have to be crossed. So this is the one central point which Sri Ramakrishna has said in his teaching, on which I have given my comments today. And Sri Ramakrishna himself has referred to how he underwent spiritual disciplines in his life. Light of knowledge. If we study his life, surely we will be freed from troubles we are facing in this world. Sri Ramakrishna has given simple but very effective instructions to practice. We have come to Sri Ramakrishna. We have just now meditated on him. It has got tremendous significance. The spiritual power works in a mysterious way. It may not be visible to us, but we feel the effect of it. If we wholeheartedly pray to the divine, even for a few moments, gives lot of peace. Spiritual ideas, spiritual life have tremendous bearing on us. It is true, as long as we are in this world, we are to face number of difficulties. Nobody can escape from them. But we must know how to bear those difficulties and continue our spiritual journey. Sri Ramakrishna again and again said, the most important teaching of Sri Ramakrishna throughout the pages of Gospel, in some form or other, he says, it is possible to see God. It is possible to see God. Straightforward, simple but forceful. Sri Ramakrishna, the personification of truth, he is telling it is possible to see God. That means to see God in this world. That is why it has got great significance. Suppose I say we can see God after death. It makes no sense. We don't know what will happen after death. Nobody knows. Nobody can definitely say where the soul has gone. Once the soul has left the body, the soul itself does not know what body he had before. Whether a male body, whether a female body, whether a human body, whether a demon body, or whether an animal body, whether a plant body, he doesn't remember anything. Once the body is cast off, all the adjuncts, what we call upadhis, connected with the body, are dropped away. In one way, the soul is free. It is out of the cage. We are imprisoned, as it were, in this body, in the senses. We helplessly watch things going on. Helplessly. We know it should not be, but it does. It goes that way. I know mind should not go this way, but mind runs that way. We have to suffer helplessly. So the need of assurance, the need of seeing God in this very life is very important. And Sri Ramakrishna has come to show that it is not a myth, it is not imagination. God is more real than anything else in this world. You can see God, you can talk to Him, you can communicate with Him through all your qualities. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, first he says it's possible. That's the first important affirmative, which should encourage us to step into spiritual path. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells, once the goal is set, once you are definite, I am able to see God in this very life, then the next step would be to make little effort, to engage ourselves in spiritual activities. Very important. Spiritual activities. The more we do, the better. In fact, in this context, I am happy to recollect how we had a wonderful program in Ganges, Gayatri Mahayajna. Really, it was a remarkable event, which was done according to Vedic tradition. At least some of the people have tried. What great joy it gives. What great impression it creates on the mind. Everybody is happy after the ceremony was over. It's a spiritual joy which is incomparable. I was really very happy and thrilled to see such program. We must engage ourselves that way. It is difficult to organize spiritual activities. It is difficult to spare time to such things. But effort should be made. Little effort on our side, then how everything will come by itself. Somebody will come and help us and show us the way further. So when Sri Ramakrishna said like this, Master Mahasaya, a remarkable householder devotee, where do we find such a person? Ideal householder, we should say, who would shed tears of joy by just remembering Sri Ramakrishna. His whole life, the latter part of his life was spent in prayers and meditation. His whole life was in ecstasy. What he had to achieve, he got. What is God realization? He understood. He was face to face in front of God Himself. He's talking to God Himself. And for the first time he is realizing how God would be, how He behaves, how He loves, how He showers His grace upon everyone. That is why He is called Kripa Sindhu, ocean of grace. Kripa, ocean of grace. So Master Mahasi thought he was married, he had children, so a doubt crossed his mind. Is it possible to realize God? People may talk. We know the difficulty. Somebody else may tell many things, but the person who is at it knows how difficult it is. He admits. He says, I am a married man, I had children. Is it ever possible to see God, to experience that ecstasy, to get freedom, to get release from bondage? When the doubt crossed in his mind, Sri Ramakrishna just said, surely one can. Surely one can realize God, no matter what He is. Through the grace of God, it should be possible to see Him. How beautifully the idea is given. Grace of God. But grace of God is a mysterious power. It works in a very subtle way. We have to be prepared to receive that grace. We must be very fortunate to be touched by the loving grace of God. God is near him who sees him inward with the eye of love. Whenever the idea of God comes, let alone loving, always the attitude is demand. Why God is so unkind to me? Why He is not giving me a good job? Does He not know I am suffering in the home? I am not able to pay my bills. I am undergoing so much of poverty. What God is doing? If God is not helping me, I don't want that God. So with this quarreling attitude, with this fighting mood, how can you appreciate God? You will never be able to understand Him until you prepare yourself properly to receive Him. God is very close to us. We feel His companionship only when we cherish proper love towards God. There is an instance. Sri Ramakrishna one day was in Bhava Samadhi, in ecstatic mood, was totally absorbed in spiritual ideas. The mind was in a very high state, in a higher plane. He saw a vision. In that vision, he saw a tank, Haladar Pukur. One villager had gone there to fetch water. Sri Ramakrishna is observing him. What was he doing? He was removing the weeds which had covered the water completely. Then he was examining it now and again, taking it up in his hand. So, referring to this incident, Sri Ramakrishna observes that it has got great significance. Just as water can never be seen unless one removes the weeds on the surface, love of God and realization of God cannot be achieved if one does not make effort towards that end. You will appreciate grace, you will understand the significance of grace. You know how everything is going on by His grace. You will be awakened by grace only through little effort. What is that effort? That also Sri Ramakrishna defines. Not doing anything and everything can be called as effort. You do everything and say it is effort. That's how we do everything and call it spiritual. No. You have to follow the correct ways, then only it can be classified as spiritual or not. So, here effort means spiritual activity. Not going and sitting in the laboratory for 12 hours, I did my effort. Karma Yoga I did. One guest had come here about a few years back. Another guest also came with him. There were two guests staying with us. They came to me. One guest is introducing the another to me. Swamiji, he is a great Karma Yogi. First sentence. Then he is explaining further. Without my asking me. He said, Swamiji, he is a great Karma Yogi. Early morning, 6 o'clock, he goes to the farm, he cultivates the whole land, comes back night. And he gets a bumper crop. And he sells the produce in the market and he's very happy. He calls that Karma Yoga. There is a tendency for us, call everything by whatever you want. It carries, that is why it has lost its meaning. Even the word God has lost its meaning, so to say. Because we have not given proper care and attention to the values. So here, Sri Ramakrishna is specifying what is effort. It is repeating the name of God. Singing His glories. These are Sri Ramakrishna's words. Mark them. Repeating the name of God, singing His glories, offering prayers, performing charity, and participating in sacrifices. These are all the holy activities that lead one to God. When we are engaged in these activities, mind is raised to a particular level, and you will feel and you will experience the joy of grace. When we see the sun, we see it with the sun's own light. Is it not? Because sunlight is there, so we are able to see the sun. No other light is required for that. Even so, we see the Lord through His grace alone. Through His grace. Once Sri Ramakrishna visited Keshav Chandra Sen. He was suffering from ailments. Who is free from suffering? Whether a spiritual man or a worldly man or this man or that man, everybody has to suffer. Suffering is a part of experience. Whether you like it or not, you have to have it. That's the beauty of it. If you must have it, then don't dislike it. To that extent, you will be able to bear with and survive. So Sri Ramakrishna was talking with them in the course of his talk. He was referring to the people. There are people and people. All are not same. There are people who are very active from the worldly point of view. In the midst of their intense worldly activities, they pray to God. And Sri Ramakrishna appreciates them. They are the heroes. The activities did not make them stop praying to God. They are striving for God realization while carrying heavy loads on their heads. Sri Ramakrishna calls them real heroes. The householders who are struggling very hard, who have come to spiritual path with all difficulties, they are able to come, they are able to sit in the class, they are able to make the mind sit for a few moments. Everything is done by Herculean effort. I know, it's not so easy. Even coming to the chapel, it requires a lot of planning. You have to drive, you have to make strong will. Sometimes you will, while coming, mind may change. Instead of coming to chapel, you may go somewhere. It happens. It's not easy to have that determination. So Sri Ramakrishna is appreciating, in spite of all these shortcomings, they are struggling. They are struggling. And God is ready to help them, to give them peace. It may be extremely difficult. Sri Ramakrishna admits that. He doesn't say it is very simple. He knows it is very difficult, but then Sri Ramakrishna makes a remark. Is there anything, however hard, that cannot be achieved through God's grace? His grace makes even the impossible possible. Then Sri Ramakrishna gives the example. If the lamp is brought into a room that has been dark 1,000 years, does it illumine the room little by little? The room is light all at once. So these reassuring words gladdened the hearts of Keshav and other household devotees. So all that depression was just washed away by the spiritual power emanated from Sri Ramakrishna. He could just wash them away. All the people, they felt immensely peaceful. That feeling of peace itself is a grace. Otherwise you can't get peace. Very important quality that is required to experience the grace of God is that we should be honestly simple. The more simple, the more we come near to God. You know, there is a devotee by name Ramchandra Dutt, a great household devotee. He could spend many days with Sri Ramakrishna, and he had heard Sri Ramakrishna's teachings many times. His whole life has undergone total transformation by contact with Sri Ramakrishna. Towards the latter part of his life, his whole mind was on Sri Ramakrishna, nothing else. If people come there and talk about, he would immediately say, don't talk anything other than Sri Ramakrishna or his teachings in front of me. If you want to talk, you are welcome. Please talk somewhere else. Not here. At least I want to hear about Sri Ramakrishna and his teachings. I don't relish any other talk. He was so sincere because he knew the value of Sri Ramakrishna's teachings, the value of remembering his teachings more and more, so that it becomes part and parcel of our being. Constantly thinking, it creates wonderful impression on the mind. So it rises you to the sattvic mode, which is very essential to experience grace. And he was telling to his people, he had been to Simla. He was suffering from ailments, some asthma, etc. During those days there was no proper medical treatment. People had to suffer. So finally he thought he might not live. So he told the people, well, let me go back to my place. That is Kankurkach Yoga Dhyan in Calcutta. It's Calcutta suburb. Please take me there. That was his home. Please take me there immediately. I don't want to spend any more time here in Simla. Let me pass my body there. Because that place is holy for me. Sri Ramakrishna has come there many times and he has blessed the place. And I want to cast off this body there. But the household people, the other people, if you tell one thing, they do another way. So they were not giving due attention to what he said because they knew that the climate in Calcutta suburb was worse than what he is enjoying now in Simla. So according to their worldly calculations, it was not good for Ramchandra Dutt to move away from Simla to Yoga Dhyan. But he was very insistent. And then he came to, oh, these people are not doing anything. Now I have to take action on myself. So he ordered some people, some palanquin to be brought, and simply walked out. He came to the place and then he instructed the people. He just lived there 5 days more. Then he left his body. Before leaving the body, he told the people, look, any day I may pass away. This body is burnt. You collect the ashes. One casket of ash, you bury it at the entrance of the building. So whoever passes into the building must pass through that. So that he was very definite. The devotees of Sri Ramakrishna would come in large numbers to see the place, to be blessed by Sri Ramakrishna. Because Sri Ramakrishna's relics he had kept. It is a very holy place. If you happen to go to Calcutta, you may please visit that place. It belongs to Ramakrishna Mission. So his idea was, let the dust of the feet of the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna be constantly pouring on my head. See that feeling. It was so humble. He became so humble, thorough. That simplicity, if we develop, you will immediately receive the grace of God. What is the meaning of receiving the grace of God? You will have the vision of God. You will know the truth and you will enjoy supreme peace. That is the value of grace. Another instance is there. One devotee, I think his name is Manmohan. One day he was walking through in the street, somebody was criticizing Sri Ramakrishna. You know, there are always people to criticize. Not knowing. Even if they know, they may not know properly. Anyway, when Manmohan came to know this, he became very angry, furious, and he began to scold that person severely. Look, if you talk any word more, I will teach you a lesson. So in a way, he forced him to shut up his mouth. Then afterwards, this incident has happened, and then Manmohan went to see Sri Ramakrishna. As soon as he saw Manmohan, Sri Ramakrishna is making a statement. Why should one become angry? He knows the whole incident. And Manmohan was surprised. Sri Ramakrishna came to know everything. And Sri Ramakrishna is telling in a general way, pointing to this reference. Why should you become angry? What does it matter if a person criticizes me or praises me? I should not be shaken by any of these things, either praise or censure. And Sri Ramakrishna explains further. Suppose he praises me. Is it possible for me to give him 6 jars of gold? I don't have so much gold to give him. Suppose he criticizes me. Can I beat him and teach him a lesson? I don't have that power. So he does. I don't want any of this. Let them do what they want to do. So that equanimity, that's a tremendous spiritual quality, equanimity. If you are free from ego, then you are not hurt by anybody. If you feel you are important, you are somebody, then you are sure to be hurt by some things. Even people may not criticize. Even by seeing the things while walking, you may feel hurt. Some things are not to your liking. You may feel displeased. Oh, I am not happy. This road is very crowded. So we have to develop that kind of simplicity and humility. Then you will understand the value and greatness of grace. So what Sri Ramakrishna is telling, to summarize what I have talked all this time, to conduct ourselves, to engage ourselves in spiritual activities more intensely, more honestly, giving our whole being into that. We mean what we are doing. We are not wasting the time. We are not wasting the time. Every minute is golden. We have used the time in a very valuable way. So like this, the devotees are to be trained properly. The spiritual aspirants must be trained properly. Those who come to spiritual path are to be trained properly. Why this temple is constructed, why the services are there, every day, Vesper service, morning service, all these things. Because it's not possible for every home to have all such things in their home. At least here this place is provided, all of you can come and sit and have that activity done. So, to make easy, in spite of all difficulties you are undergoing, it is possible to maintain your spiritual fervor and to continue your spiritual practices so that you may receive God's grace and make your life peaceful and blessed. Sri Ramakrishna's teachings in the Gospel are meant for people who really want to have peace and joy in their life. That means we should know how to live the life. We should know the technique of living the life in this world. It is very important to note this point. Sri Ramakrishna has clearly told how to conduct ourselves in the world where we are living. There is no point in simply criticizing the world. There is no point in simply finding fault with people, our surroundings, our situations. We will not get real peace if we have that attitude in our life. So Sri Ramakrishna tells very clearly simple ways to live in this world. We have taken birth here. Whether we like it or not, we have to sail the boat. If you know how to sail the boat properly, you will reach the shore. Otherwise, you may sink on the way. But there are always hopes and guidance from men of spirituality. Out of their infinite love and compassion for the humanity, they come. They approach us with all kindness and affection and give practical teachings. It's not difficult to follow, only we should have mind to do it. We should have mind to do it. If we are aspiring for the worldly type of joy, there is bound to be always unpleasantness. Worldly happiness is always mixed with unpleasantness. The very nature of the worldly happiness is like that. As the world is constantly changing and so it is unreal, In the same way, the worldly happiness is constantly under change and so unreal. It doesn't stay on. That is the tragedy of the worldly joys. They won't stay on. They just tempt you so that you may be succumbed, that's all. But in that process, you are lost. Instead of getting the real joy in this world, you are just ending up in getting unreal one, consequently suffering. So Sri Ramakrishna tells, live in this world as the mud fish lives in the mud. This world is compared to the mud. We are all fishes. One living with family, etc. Naturally, he is pulled down by so many things. The situations will not allow him to remain peaceful, even though he wants it. The pulls are so terrible, even the little peace he had would be destroyed. So Sri Ramakrishna is suggesting, what's the way for the family people? He says, go now and again to holy places, where you get holy association. Go there more frequently. Engage yourself in meditation, prayers. Do them consciously and try to live with them, those who practice spirituality in their actual life. It has got tremendous effect, and that is the way to get the real peace and joy in this world. It's only when we become associated with men of spirituality, it is possible to develop love of God. Developing love of God is very important. Without that, you won't get any peace. What has happened? Love of the world has taken away all our mind. And so, naturally, life has become miserable. Though outwardly it looks very fine, inside it is all rotten. Why is it so? Because the mind has fallen in love with the world. It is burdened with worldly entanglements. Days, weeks, months, years pass away in quick succession. Love of God gives an awakening. It makes you turn in the right direction. For the first time, you will be able to experience real joy in life when you develop love of God. Then you feel every day, every moment is very precious and very auspicious. Every day is most sacred. And the time has been given to us by the all-merciful God to make use of it properly. The value of time we understand correctly when we develop love of God. By whatever means, we should be able to do that. Spirituality begins only when the love of God sprouts in our heart. We should take all steps to see how that sprouts. The day when God is remembered and prayed is considered very auspicious. Shubhamangala, we call in Sanskrit. Hariya ನೆನೆಸಿದ ದಿವಸ ಶುಭಮಂಗಳ. When you remember God, that day is very auspicious. On the contrary, the day that has gone without God's remembrance is inauspicious. The time passed without remembering God is passed in vain. The time that God is remembered ever brings happiness, calmness. The time that is not spent in remembering God is bad. The time that is used in remembering God helps one to go forward towards liberating oneself from miseries. The time not used for spiritual endeavors may lead one to death. He who has remembered God, he who is repeating the divine name is really blessed. He who has not started repeating the divine name of God, he who has not given any attention to remembering God, has wasted his human life in vain. He who constantly remembers God is verily liberated. Now coming to the analogy, the mud is there and the fish has to live in it, but its body is not stained by the mud. So, the love of God enables one to live in the world in a spirit of detachment. You are not running away from the world. You are not running away from your family, from your household, from your friends, kith and kin, relations, etc. Only your attitude is changed. Changed for good, not for bad. The priority in life should be spiritual achievement. Sri Ramakrishna has pointed out this many times.